began as most catastrophes do, with optimism. I believed, stupidly, naively, like a god who has never met a crustacean, that adopting a baby octopus for the interdimensional library would improve morale. A tiny cephalopod, a wriggling, curious blob of suction-cupped enthusiasm. Something to brighten the day of archivists who have been sorting cursed manuscripts since the last heat death. So I acquired Little Thor. Little Thor is roughly the size of a balled-up sock, the color of confused pink throw-up, and has the personal confidence of a creature who believes the universe is simply a well-decorated aquarium put there for him to taste test. His tank sits in my study. Yes, the study where I once contemplated the stars in dignified silence. Now it's where a small aquatic anarchist performs emotional street theater by tap dancing on my head. The first night I attempted to sleep, I heard a wet thwap. I opened an eye. Little Thor had risen from the water like a small sentient garnish and extended one curious tentacle toward me. I assumed he wanted enrichment. Enrichment I can handle. I have raised daughters. I have negotiated with kaiju. I can provide snacks. So I offered him shrimp, a simple peace offering between god and cephalopod. He accepted with the solemn grace of a minor deity receiving tribute. Mission accomplished, I thought, equilibrium restored. I returned to bed, basking in the smug illusion that I had successfully negotiated with hunger itself. And then, without shame or hesitation, the tentacle reached out again. Slowly, silently, like a bureaucrat requesting a second form of identification. Perhaps he wanted more shrimp. Reasonable. We all crave midnight snacks. So I gave him another. A second tribute. A conciliatory offering. A desperate bribe to reclaim even a fraction of my personal space. And yet, to my surprise and growing horror, the tentacle remained extended, stiff as a judgmental finger, wiggling like it had notes, as if he was silently informing me that Reese's has lied, that 2 is not the universal serving size for snacks, and that some creatures will, in fact, reach for a third, a fourth, and eventually for the arm of the nearest butler. Because apparently, in the inch-deep kiddie pool, that is octopus psychology, 2 shrimp is not closure. 2 shrimp is merely a conversation starter. I frowned. The tentacle flexed, tilted, curled, uncurled, then curled again with an air of growing judgment. Anyone else might say, "Ah, how cute, he's wiggling." But I know better. I have met cephalopods. They do nothing without intention. They are 8-armed philosophers with suction cups. They communicate entirely through undulating implication. To my growing horror, I realized the truth. Little Thor was talking to me. Octopuses, as scholars and fishmongers know, have a decentralized nervous system. Their arms possess enough autonomy to hold a doctorate and apply for tenure. Which means when Little Thor's limbs wiggle at me, I'm not only dealing with Little Thor, but Thor's 8 emotionally volatile subcommittees. One tentacle tells me he is hungry. Another tells me he is bored. A third wonders if I'm emotionally available. A fourth wants to unionize with my safety vault filled with my tray of croissants. A fifth gestures in a way that suggests I have disappointed him morally. So, dear listener, imagine trying to sleep while an infant sea sorcerer holds a therapy session across dimensions. I attempted to reason with him. Little Thor, it is bedtime now. Even your arms must rest from time to time. One tentacle flattened itself dramatically on the glass, like a Victorian child perishing of ennui. Another pointed at me, accusatorially. A third tapped the tank lid with the slow, rhythmic tempo of judgment. But ultimately, Little Thor got tired of its 8 subcommittees and sunk into deep sleep. By the second night, I could no longer tell which tentacle was voicing which emotional complaint. They moved like a committee that had dissolved into interpretive dance. At one point, I think Tentacle 5 tried to confess a private trauma. Tentacle 2 interrupted to request another shrimp. Tentacle 7 attempted to comfort me, which is frankly unacceptable. I am the ancient horror here, not the one in need of mollusk-based reassurance. By the second night, Little Thor had discovered a better place to communicate his thoughts. My head. Everywhere I went, his 8 tendons performed a tap dance routine across my scalp. While I read, while I freed Zeus's father from the underworld as a joke, even while I attempted to bathe inside a black hole, and despite every rational objection, I realized I was bonding with him. He was, undeniably, my Wilson, if Wilson were a sentient space calamari with boundary issues. By the third sleepless night, I found myself responding to his tentacle movements as though they were actual dialogue. A curl of his arm meant, "I feel misunderstood." A twitch meant, "Have you processed your own feelings about your father?" A tap meant, "We should run away together to a tide pool." This is untenable. I am an elder god. I cannot be held hostage by the seafood equivalent of a tiny life coach. And yet, I sit here in my study, eyes heavy, robe askew, while Little Thor rises slowly from his tank like a damp oracle and extends one hopeful arm into the air. The arm wiggles with all the gravitas of a cephalopod delivering a keynote speech. I know he is about to say something profound and incomprehensible, probably about boundaries, or shrimp, or the ethics of sleeping while he, a baby, is awake and contemplative. This is my life now, apparently, and if one more tentacle taps the tank tonight, I am moving him to Madeline's office. Let her deal with the aquatic feelings. She already has the HR degree for it. However, by the third night, I realized that even eldritch gods require childcare. Little Thor had developed the unnerving habit of suction cupping to my face whenever I attempted rest, and while cosmic empathy is an admirable trait, it's difficult to experience REM sleep through 8 affectionate tentacles, so I called in Jarvis. Jarvis, my zombie butler, is the sort of undead who treats catastrophe as an inconvenient smudge on the silverware. He once tried to dust a neutron star because it looked a bit dull. His demeanor falls somewhere between dogged workaholicism and permanent concussion, and his devotion to etiquette has survived both death and decomposition.
"Sir,"
he said upon arrival, bowing with the faint crackle of ancient joints.
"I understand the creature requires supervision."
Yes, Jarvis. You'll be watching Little Thor while I attend to divine administration. Feed him shrimp. Keep him moist. Under no circumstances allow him to achieve philosophical insight. Last time he did that, we lost a dimension. Jarvis nodded gravely.
"Very good, sir. Shall I prepare him a bedtime story?"
Preferably something without mentioning the Kraken. He thinks it's a dollar store knockoff of me, and I don't blame him. Anyway, careful listener, let me tell you a little bit more about my long-suffering zombie butler. For the most part, he is built entirely out of stalwart intentions, cartilage, and whatever necromantic glue is holding him together. Unfortunately for him, but most very fortunate for me. He possesses, through no fault of his own, the weary dignity of someone who has spent several centuries being told to fetch things that were on the other side of volcanoes. He shuffles, he mumbles, he brings waffles when waffles are not requested. His personality, in essence, is British deferential misery with a pinch of pickled despair. He was the perfect candidate to monitor Little Thor. At least that was my first mistake. On the first night of Jarvis duty, I attempted to return to my bed, believing delusionally that someone else could handle the cephalopodic burden. I even entrusted him with a tray of fresh croissants. both as incentive and to ensure Little Thor did not translate Jarvis's presence as a sign of emotional abandonment. But what occurred next can only be described as aquatic tragedy with slapstick choreography. I had barely reclined into my pillow before I heard a splash, followed by Jarvis's signature groan, the sound of a man who has seen his own arm fall off so many times he now treats it like an inconvenient receipt. I rushed back to the study, tentacles in knots, only to witness a scene that would have made Poseidon resign in shame. Little Thor had seized Jarvis's arm like the last golden ticket to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. The baby octopus, my precious morale booster, was clinging to Jarvis's detached limb like a Moby Dick creature reenacting an ancient maritime feud. And Jarvis, dear senile Jarvis, was standing there trying to reason with him.
Little sir, if I might? No, please give that back, sir. That's my arm, sir. If I may trouble you, sir, please.
Little Thor was not persuaded. The octopus dragged the arm triumphantly into his tank like it was sacred treasure, or worse, a therapy object. Jarvis, in his exhausted loyalty, reached in to retrieve it. This was his second mistake, because Little Thor interpreted the gesture as a hostile act. The baby latched onto him with the full power of 8 emotionally loaded limbs. Watching this unfold, I naturally assumed Little Thor was expressing some kind of deep metaphor, a symbolic message. Perhaps the arm represented Jarvis's intrusive tendencies. Perhaps the croissants on the tray symbolized boundaries. Perhaps Little Thor was communicating that I too cling too tightly to things that do not serve me. A personal critique, disguised as cephalopod drama, I launched into analysis. Jarvis, on the other hand, or arm, launched into panic.
Master Cthulhu, sir, he's taking my other arm. Sir, the croissants. Sir, they're sinking. Sir, please.
But I was too engrossed. Fascinating, I remarked while sinking more into the comfort of my bed. He's making a statement about emotional labor. Observe how he rejects the tray. Jarvis, take notes.
Sir, I cannot take notes without arms.
Little Thor, meanwhile, wrestled Jarvis like a mythological beast reenacting a maritime opera, sending croissants swirling in the water like buttery meteors. I watched in academic fascination as my breakfast pastries dissolved into soggy metaphors. Jarvis watched his hope dissolve alongside them, and still I analyzed. Remarkable. Each tentacle seems to be expressing a unique grievance. That one is disappointment. That one is attachment. That one might be trauma. Jarvis, please stop splashing. You're interrupting his thesis.
He has my shoulder, sir.
By the time Little Thor released him, Jarvis was missing 2 arms, 1 shoe, and his dignity. The croissants were lost. The water was cloudy with crumbs and despair. Little Thor, triumphant, returned to his rock and flicked 1 tentacle at me with the smug energy of a toddler who has successfully overpowered the babysitter. And for the first time, perhaps in smug eldritch parenting satisfaction, I began dozing off to sleep. The last thing I heard before drifting off into my favorite void was Jarvis's defeated, languishing in despair.
Sir, he took the good arm.
I peer out one last time and remind him zombies regenerate and to just shake it off. And if he can't, there's a Waffle House nearby with a gravesite of decaying customers. Interpret that however you'd like. Anyway, as for Little Thor, he wriggles happily. From his tank, he taps the glass as if to say, and I will do it again.